Now in the 1980s, one of the most famous storylines of the X-Men that appeared was the Phoenix Saga, and with Jean Grey becoming the Dark Phoenix, and what happens to her quiets the love triangle between Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops, as she becomes the Dark Phoenix, and she becomes basically an enemy of the X-Men, and it appears that she died at that point. Later on in the 1980s, Wolverine gains new peers. He becomes more of a mentor to help train some of the newer X-Men, including Longshot. Longshot is a mutant that has good luck powers. Longshot, who is from an alternate dimension, so basically he can use his powers to bring good luck to people. That's kind of cheesy, but it works, I guess, from the 80s. Another mutant that he was friends with was Dazzler, and Dazzler is a mutant who can sing really well. She's a rock star. It was the 80s, right? And then the other mutant was Rogue, and you can see in the original X-Men movie, Logan and Rogue became good friends, and they kind of had a brother-sister relationship there. Later on in the 1980s, Wolverine goes back to Japan and gets engaged to Mariko Yoshida during the time he was fighting the Hand, which is a criminal organization that's all assassins and ninjas, basically. The engagement doesn't last. This is also around the same time that he meets up with the Silver Samurai and Lady Deathstrike, or known as Yuriko. And lastly, in the 1980s, during the storyline Mutant Massacre, Wolverine and the X-Men, the American mutant team X-Factor, Daredevil, and Thor. And during this storyline, Wolverine has another big fight with Sabretooth. And during this fight, he starts to remember some of his forgotten memories. Now that we've learned what happened to Wolverine in the 1980s, let's change focus, staying with the 1980s, but seeing what happened to Wolverine in animation. In 1982, Wolverine guest starred on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, where one of Spider-Man's amazing friends is Firestar, and she decides to go back to, because she was originally part of the X-Men team, she decides to go back to the X-Men for the X-Men reunion. And you see Wolverine there has a Australian accent. And he is famously known for, in that episode, I believe it's that episode, where he has his claws stuck into a wall and he can't retract them. I don't understand that, but that's how it was. And he was voiced by William Calloway.
This is our other new member, Wolverine.
How you doing? Want a piece of fruit? I'm stuck!
From the success from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, in 1989, Marvel wanted to get out an X-Men TV show, so they decided to put out a pilot episode, which never actually got picked up, but it was called The Pryde of the X-Men. And if you notice on how it was spelled P-R-Y-D-E. I watched the episode a long time ago, and it wasn't bad. Not like the X-Men incarnations nowadays or from the 90s, but it was trying to get a new series off the ground, but it just wasn't picked up. Now, also in the 1980s, another brand new start for Wolverine and the X-Men was in video games. And there was two games that came out in 1989. The first one was the Uncanny X-Men for the NES, produced by LJN. The game was inspired by the TV pilot episode, The Pryde of the X-Men, and included bosses like Juggernaut, Emma Frost, the White Queen, Magneto, Sabretooth, and Boomerang. Unfortunately, the game was not received well by fans, so it didn't do that well. But, I mean, for the first game, stupid fly. I'm sorry, that fly, there's a fly flying around here. It's just annoying. If I had claws, I would stab that fly. Also in 1989, designed by Paragon Software for the PC, for the MS-DOS operating system, Commodore 64, and Amiga, is X-Men Madness in Murderworld. Now this game was all about the villain Arcade. He's basically Marvel's version of the Trickster, or not the Joker, but something similar down that line. With his base, he makes it into like a carnival, and it's like a fun house. And in the game, Arcade works with Magneto, and Magneto kidnaps Professor Charles Xavier. So you play as Wolverine and the X-Men, trying to find him and rescue Professor X. Back when the game came out, Compute Magazine gave it 4 out of 5 stars for playability, documentation, originality, and graphics. And now, let's move to the 1990s.
Okay, bub.
Wolverine becomes a mentor to Jubilee, and Jubilee is new to the X-Men. She's a teenager, and she can create fireworks or sparks, well, actually more like fireworks, out of her hands into the air. And after being a mentor to Jubilee, Wolverine and the X-Men find out that Jean Grey actually returned from the Phoenix Force, from the Phoenix Saga. The Phoenix Force is an alien entity in the comics, and she's back to her normal self. That kind of reunites the love triangle between Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey. Later on in the 90s, Wolverine continues to discover forgotten memories from the past because of the Weapon X project. And then at one point he meets this character called Maverick, in which back in Canada, he actually worked with Maverick within the Canadian government and learns more about his history. And in 1993, of issue 25 of the X-Men, Magneto and Wolverine gets into a fight, and Magneto, using his magnetism, is able to rip out all of the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. And from that experience, Wolverine is badly wounded, but over time he was able to heal using his healing powers. But his adamantium did not return. During the time that Wolverine's body is healing, he decides to go on his own and leaves the X-Men to allow his body to naturally heal, which during that time, it kind of made him more wild and feral, like when he first was younger. And he came in contact with Elektra, as in Daredevil and Elektra, and she was able to help him get his humanity back and not be as feral. And Elektra just used her experience from the Stick, which is who mentored her and Daredevil. Eventually, Wolverine rejoins the X-Men, and later on, in one of the missions they have, the X-Men are fighting one of their worst enemies, Apocalypse. And in that storyline, Apocalypse actually captures Wolverine and tries to control and brainwash Wolverine to become one of his Horsemen. Now, a little bit about Apocalypse. Apocalypse is this ancient mutant from Egypt, and he's actually known as one of the first mutants on Earth. And he's based off of, if you're Catholic or if you're Christian, you're familiar with the Book of Revelation or the Book of Apocalypse. And in the Catholic Bible is the Apocalypse, in the Protestant Bible is the Book of Revelation. And it talks about, well, the end times and the apocalypse, and it talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So when Marvel created Apocalypse, the villain, they kind of got inspiration from the Book of Revelation or the Book of the Apocalypse in the Catholic Bible. And he made 4 different mutants to follow him, and they were the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which the name the Horsemen of the Apocalypse is actually mentioned in the Book of Revelation and the Apocalypse. Interesting fact. Anyway, so in the comics, Wolverine is captured and brainwashed to become one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Actually, before Wolverine breaks free of his control, Apocalypse actually rebonds the Adamantium process back onto his skeleton. So essentially, Wolverine goes through another Weapon X project, but this time it's by Apocalypse. Poor guy. But eventually breaks from his control. He rejoins the X-Men after that. Eventually later, Jean Grey becomes the Phoenix again, as the alien Phoenix Force comes back and takes control of her again. And at this point, the only way to stop her, they weren't able to separate her from the Phoenix again. Wolverine had to make a choice and ended up killing Jean Grey to save the Earth and save the X-Men from the Phoenix Force, unfortunately, which has been done in the movies as well, especially X-Men 3.
Save me. I love
you. Later on, Logan, or Wolverine, finds out about X-23. X-23 is a female clone of Wolverine, based from his DNA. But at the time, Wolverine doesn't actually know that the DNA from X-23 was from himself, right? And so she is rescued. She actually joins the X-Men, introduced as Wolverine's sister. And then eventually when Logan finds out that her DNA was actually based off of and comes from him, he becomes more of a father figure to X-23. And later on, she takes the name of Wolverine in the future. During the storyline of the House of M, the mutant and she's also an Avenger. This is when she was going through a rough time. The Scarlet Witch, she has powers where she can alter reality. And in this storyline, she was altering reality. And during that time, Wolverine is actually able to learn more of the memories he forgot because of what happened in the past in Canada because of the Scarlet Witch. Eventually, in the storyline of Wolverine Origins, Wolverine discovers that his son, Daken, who he thought died, survived, and he makes it his mission to go back and find him and rescue him from Romulus. Later on, after the Wolverine Origins storyline, Wolverine is asked by Cyclops to restart up the X-Force team, which previously was a team that was ran by the American government. And so Wolverine uses his leadership skills to start a new team, And some of the characters that joined the team besides himself was X-23, Wolfbane, and Warpath. Eventually, after time has progressed, the X-Force team disbanded, and Wolverine decided he didn't want to give up on the team, so he restarted the team again as himself, Angel or Archangel, Psylocke, and Deadpool. So after some time, Wolverine and Cyclops have another falling out, and because of the falling out, Wolverine decides to create a new school for gifted youngsters. So now there's two different schools, and the one that Wolverine starts up is actually called the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, in which Wolverine is the top person, so he's kind of like the principal, and the vice principal is Henry McCoy, aka Beast. And when they started that school, about half of the mutants from the original school that Scott was now running actually moved over to the new school. Now let's look at animation. Now in the 1990s, Marvel was able to put out an actual TV show from 1992 to 1997, X-Men, the animated series. And X-Men was the show that made X-Men popular to people who actually didn't read the comics. The show was based off the comics with some tweaks, but there's a lot of things that I didn't talk about that was in the lore and the comics, Wolverine and the X-Men, that I didn't touch on, which the show actually does touch on. So I'll talk a bit about it, but this is actually volume 1 of the 90s X-Men show from, like I said, from 1992 to 1997. I do have the full series, but I'm not going to show you it every box. I just thought this would be good because you can see Wolverine right front and center with the X-Men. X-Men animated TV series was the first TV series to be the start of the Marvel animated universe in the 90s, which also included X-Men, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Silver Surfer, and later on the Avengers, which is more like the West Coast Avengers. So the X-Men the animated series featured obviously the X-Men and also one of the members was Wolverine, and they did touch on a lot of different stories from the comics, not everything. It was the gateway for people to learn about the X-Men that didn't read the comics, and that's even today people love the show and think about it a lot, and which inspired the revival series X-Men 97, which is on Disney Plus now. I still actually haven't watched it yet, just because I'm in the process of rewatching everything, and I don't want to miss anything. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody else, so I'm not really going to talk a bit about it. And Wolverine is voiced by Cal Dodd, which also voices Wolverine in X-Men 97 as well. Some of the backstories that the animated series covered from Wolverine's perspective was the Weapon X story, how he became Wolverine, and getting the Adamantium.
Is it damaged?
Nothing serious.
Then begin the Adamantium feed.
Feed initiated. Steady. Cardio attack higher than expected.
Extraordinary.
Though in the show, it's different from the comics. Though in the show, it's different than the comics because in the show, Wolverine didn't originally have bone claws. he had obviously his skeleton, but he had his mutant abilities with the healing factor and sniffing, but he didn't have bone claws. That came from the Weapon X project when he got Adamantium, that it added the retractable claws. Because they show an episode where he's in World War II and he's working with Captain America, and at that point he has claws, but they attach onto his fists. So they're not actually part of him then. So that's where the whole conversation about having bone claws or not having bone claws comes into effect, right? So, as you can see, like in pulp culture, like on Big Bang Theory, for example.
We'll need a can opener to get inside.
No can opener, but these might do.
Handy little gimmick.
Excuse me, Wolverine Origin miniseries issue 2, page 22, retractable bone claws.
Some of the other storylines they touch on is about Alpha Flight, his rivalries with Sabretooth, his time in Japan, which in the show they changed it a bit, and he was originally in love with Mariko, or Lady Deathstrike, and that was before she becomes Lady Deathstrike. And then also they introduced the Silver Samurai.
You again.
I promise, whatever happens, I'll come back to you.
Also later on in the show, Wolverine deals with a lot of heartache. There's different times where he leaves the X-Men just to try to find himself, including in Japan, and then also when they meet up with Nightcrawler, he learns about the Bible and Christianity and Catholicism. At the end of one episode, he actually starts reading the Bible and trying to find himself.
Son, you are only yourself, no one else.
The foundation God has built in our hearts can never be destroyed.
Man, I don't get you.
Here, I've marked a few passages you may find rewarding. Remember, Herr Logan, different eyes.
And let's not forget the love triangle between Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey.
Jean?
I've gotta go. Cyclops is waiting for me.
So am I.
Now, when the Spider-Man the Animated Series came out, in Season 2, Spider-Man was going through his mutant problem. In the show, part of it was him mutating into a man spider. And before that happens, he actually goes to the X-Mansion, the school, and he was thinking that Professor X could cure him from the neogenic mutant nightmare disease that he was going through before he actually beats it later on in Season 2. But this was at the beginning of Season 2. And so it's a two-parter. They have Wolverine and Beast take a lot of the screen time from the X-Men in those two episodes, dealing with Spider-Man and trying to stop the villain of those two episodes. And so it was pretty cool seeing, Wolverine crossover with Spider-Man as a kid, seeing your superheroes crossover. And now, with the MCU, seeing all your favorite heroes crossing over brings back good memories.
My work is not to cure mutants. I've built this complex, this school, to train them. I help them accept who and what they are.
Accept it? But I don't want to be a freak.
Watch your mouth, pal. Being a mutant's a gift. Beast told you about this place. That's how I knew to find you here. Looks like your memory needs a little help.
Now let's transition to some of the figures I picked up that was from the 90s, and another one that was more recent, but it was based off of the 90s and 80s, the comics and the show. So the first toy coming from the year 1993 from Toy Biz, from Series 4, Wolverine 5th edition. Now this toy is based off of the animated series. This is when he was a secret agent, and he actually came with goggles and also weapons that would fit on the sides here. Now this toy is in not bad shape. I got him from, I believe it was from a thrift store. And I think he's in pretty good shape. I remember back in the day my cousin had this Wolverine. I'm not sure if he gave him to me or if he donated him. If I do have him as well, he's in my parents' old basement somewhere. I'm still trying to clean out. But this one I did get from a thrift store. And yeah, it looks like he's in pretty good shape. He can move a bit like that. I don't really see any paint fade. Oh, maybe at the tip of his claws. It's showing black at the tip of his claws. But yeah, he was a good find. The next toy coming from the year 1995 from Toy Biz, from the Mutant Genesis series, Wolverine Fang. Now this toy, he has a claw slashing action. You move his arms like this, and he can like almost give you a bear hug, but with claws. So, yeah. Yeah. He's in pretty good shape. I did also get him from thrifting, from a thrift store, I believe. Yeah, thrifting, yeah. He's in good shape. He's not missing anything, I don't believe. Actually, I was wrong. He actually comes with the same weapons, other than the goggles, than the first Wolverine that I showed you. The 5th edition. But he is from 1995. And the reason why he's called Wolverine Fang is that he is actually in disguise. That's why this costume does not look anything like his other costumes. I mean, besides the claws and his crazy hair face. He was in disguise to try to sneak into the Shi'ar Empire. The Shi'ar Empire is an alien race that has been known to be friends of Earth and friends of Professor Charles Xavier, but there was some times that they weren't. This was one of those times. And so yeah, one of the guards' name was Fang, and that's why he's in his costume, because he tried to go in unnoticed. He must have had his claws in, because, come on, you would have known him a mile away with claws, right? But yeah, he's in good shape. I can't complain. Oh, it actually says 1996 on his leg. So, but my research was 1995. So, probably it was made in 1995, but released in 1996. So, yeah. And the last toy I want to talk about, that's Wolverine from the year 2013. Yes, I know it's not vintage. From Hasbro, from the basic series, Wolverine Warrior Claw. Now, Warrior Claw, basically he came with this other blue, I don't know, claw or something that originally came with it. I never actually had it when I got him, and that was from thrifting as well. I never actually owned Wolverine as a kid, other than going to my cousin's place, and he had Wolverine. He had the 5th edition. So if he did give it to me, like I said, it might be in my house somewhere, my parents' house somewhere. So, but this Wolverine was based off of the 90s animated series / the comics. His original costume when he first appeared in the comics, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, was when he fought the Hulk, and he had this costume on, and this was the costume he had when he was with Alpha Flight, and it just stuck. Right? I mean, he had different costumes over the years, but this is the most famous one, and we're finally getting this costume on the big screen in the movie Deadpool and Wolverine. And yeah, he's in good shape. I can't really complain, besides him missing the accessory. Oh, he's missing some paint on his butt, but but yeah, it's good. Now let's turn our focus back to video games, but for the 90s. In 1990, Paragon Software came out with the game X-Men 2 Fall of the Mutants, which was a sequel to the first X-Men game, and you can play as Wolverine and the other X-Men. It's a multiverse game where they have Uatu the Watcher. Uatu the Watcher is a being that can see multiple multiverses, and they're not supposed to interfere with what happens in different universes. Now, if you ever watched the show Fringe, there's one alien race that's from the future. They all have bald heads. The Watcher, Uatu the Watcher, is pretty much similar. He has a bald head as well. He has a cape. He was actually in the Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the movies there. I think it was the second one, where Stanley has a cameo with the Uatu the Watcher. And then on Disney Plus right now, there's a show called What If? And it's an animated series, and it's basically different versions of the MCU, but the stories is completely different, and different characters are out of time. And this game is only for the MS-DOS OS. The next game was developed in 1991 by LJN for the NES, was Wolverine. The story behind this game is basically about Wolverine being captured by some of his old foes, including Sabretooth and Magneto, and stranded on this desert island. Wolverine needs to learn how to survive deadly traps and survive against Sabretooth and Magneto. That was pretty much the whole game. In 1992, the game developer Konami made the first X-Men game to come to the arcade, and in that game you can play as Wolverine or any of the other X-Men, fighting a lot of the lore of the X-Men villains. I think I remember playing it in the arcade. It was pretty fun.
X-Men, X-Men.
Also in 1992, made by Software Creations, was Spider-Man and the X-Men Revenge of Arcade for the Super NES. And this game I remember playing when I used to have a Super Nintendo. That was one of the games I had, and I had so much fun playing that game. You first start off as Spider-Man in the first level, and then once you beat the first level, then you can choose different missions from Spider-Man, from Wolverine, Gambit, Storm. I'm trying to remember who else. I think Cyclops. It was a bit unrealistic. I mean, it's comics, right? But in Wolverine's level, at the end of his mission, who does he fight? Apocalypse. Like, come on, he's like the X-Men's one of X-Men's most worst enemies, and Wolverine has to fight Apocalypse on his own? Come on. I don't think I've ever beaten Apocalypse as Wolverine in the game, but I quite enjoyed that game.
Tired of the same old fun and games? Welcome, Spider-Man X-Men, to the video game ride of your lives.
Wolverine, Spider-Man, Gambit, Cyclops.
Now on Genesis, the ultimate video game team. Are we having fun yet?
In 1993, another X-Men game came out for the Sega Genesis called X-Men. And yes, I have it. I remember playing it a long time ago when I was younger, when we had the Sega Genesis. Since I found it again, I need to clean it because I haven't actually got it to work. All my other Sega Genesis games do work. It shakes. Like when you shake it, it like kind of rattles. So I might need to like take it apart and tighten it maybe. But yeah, that'll be another day project. But in this game, the game starts off you being in the danger room, and then the danger room basically gets a virus, and then basically the whole game you're trying to stop this virus and villains that are in the game. So yeah, X-Men for the Sega Genesis.
Hear the sound razor-sharp adamantium claws make when they extract their revenge. They're here. Marvel Marvel's X-Men on Sega Genesis.
In 1994, produced by Capcom, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse came out for the Super NES, and the story is you basically fighting Apocalypse, and you can play as Wolverine or many of the other X-Men. Also in 1994, X-Men Children of the Atom first came out by Capcom, was the first fighting game that you could play as X-Men characters, not just like, you know, third-person story mode, but it was actually a fighting game, kind of like Street Fighter, because that's what they're known for, Capcom, is Street Fighter, and decided to put that formula into an X-Men game. And this game was for multiple systems, including PlayStation 1, PC, the arcade, and Sega Saturn. Again in 1994, another game came out for two different systems, for the Sega Genesis by Acclaim and for the Super Nintendo by LGN, called Wolverine Adamantium Rage, which was the sequel to the previous Wolverine game. But the storyline kind of differed between the two systems, so depending if you had Sega or Super Nintendo, it was a little bit different, and it continued from the previous game for that system as well. In 1995, the sequel to X-Men for the Sega Genesis, it was called X-Men 2 Clone Wars. And this was just for the Sega Genesis. You can play as like all the other X-Men games, any of the X-Men or Wolverine as well.
Magneto has arrived, only in X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis. Now 2 can play the most mutant heroes and Magneto. Sega! Marvel's X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis. Hardware and game cartridge each sold separately.
In 1996, Capcom came out with X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Initially for the arcade, this game was a huge success from the fans of X-Men and the fans of Street Fighter. I remember playing it in the arcade back in the day, and I just loved it. And you know, with Wolverine, one of his moves was Berserker Claw, Berserker Rage. It was great. And then later on came to PlayStation and some of the other systems. But initially, it was in the arcade. It's one of the games that I fondly remember, and oh man, it was awesome.
X-Men versus Street Fighter!
I hope you like this video, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.